Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of album openers, looking at the first track off of an album. This one is off of a track I can't pronounce, but it is Oranssi Pazuzu's 2016 album. The track that we are looking at is called Saturaatio, which is Finnish for saturation. So let's dive into this and see what Oranssi is bringing to the table today. So the guitars are giving us a droning concept, drums are giving us momentum, bass is giving us direction, pulling us along. Well, where I thought the bass was giving us direction, it seems it no longer is. Such a big sound. The movement of the vocals over to the left. Talk about saturation, the vocals are dripping with compression. So we've been on this idea for like 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes now. Minor variations to it. We've put vocals over it. We now have a chord progression under it. But the core element hasn't changed. Okay. Wait, it still hasn't. No, this is the same thing. Different instruments. Timbres, at least. It's still a variation. And that's the same rhythm still. Got something really haunting on the organ, maybe? This is the biggest shift and it's still the same rhythm. Even our chord progression seems meandering right here. I can't quite get a grasp on... Yeah, our chord progression just feels cyclical. Everything is a leading tone into... It's like being lost in a hedge maze. gotta be wrapping this up soon. What do we have, like a minute and a half left? We just have some very antagonistic music right here. Dark, eerie, something's off, unsettling. Really great use of atmosphere, ornamental ideas, not even just the instruments, just like sounds. Ho ho ho! That's an interesting connection. Okay, so this song is recursive, it's cyclical, it's constantly looping in back around in on itself, but in slight metamorphoses. It's never the same idea twice, but you can certainly see the patterns of evolution throughout the song. There's only one major shift in it. We do have an atmospheric shift, but not a musical one. Um, Actually, we have two atmospheric shifts, but they continue to retain several of the same ideas, mostly rhythmic and melodic, that we heard throughout the track. The one major shift there is about 2 minutes until the ending, when we get our moody outro. And so we have a song that fully explores a single idea. I don't know if you would want to call this ambient, drone. It's not really post, is it? I guess ambient and drone would be the two styles you want to go with on this. Um, we have the main rhythm that we had in the guitar work, the bass work, the drum work, all from the opening. Eventually, like I had mentioned, the bass got a different melody, and then we introduced a new guitar chordal pattern underneath it, and then we put vocals on top of it, and its main idea didn't change for a good, 4 or 5 minutes of this. And then we changed the timbre of the instruments. The notes stayed the same. The rhythm stayed the same, but the instruments were weaker. We got rid of all the distortion. We introduced an organ for some embellishing stuff over there on the left. We had two vocals going off at one time, but the core rhythm and melody We're the same in the center. The center never changes, what's around it does, and it's all reflections of the core. And I think that's fascinating because we continue to see this. Even when we move to the larger bombastic section, which would have been like I don't know, like minute 7.5 to 10, I think, of this track. Um, the rhythm and melody, well, the melody gets shifted up a little bit. We lose some components of it and gain some components or some new components to replace them, but the rhythm's the same. The reflection is still there. It's just a little blurrier, a little messier than it was last time. Maybe this mirror is one that makes you look a little taller and narrower than another mirror does. Um, and we end up hearing what I think is the first clue of the cycle in our bass, which gives us a recursive, cyclical, non directionary chord progression, which always feels like it's leading towards somewhere. And this was the point where I had mentioned that the song felt like a hedge maze. And really, up to this point, it just felt like drone to me, or ambient music. It just kind of existed, right? And we got some variations on it that was cool. But this is where the song began to take a narrative turn, and I began to understand a bit of what it was aiming for. You see, the song's always going somewhere. To me, ambient music is about sitting still and enjoying a sound. The same thing goes for drone. It's to fully explore a sound. But this is about running through a maze, only to realize that after 10 minutes of taking lefts and rights and straights at intersections, you are right back where you started. Not because you've gone in a loop, you just literally haven't changed where you've been. In a twist of unexpected break with possibly reality or an exceptionally intricate mechanical device under your feet, you have literally not moved an inch. The world has moved around you. You're not taking steps so much as pushing the ground beneath you. Your literal X, Y, and Z placement in this plane has not shifted. There is no exit because the maze is building itself around you. It is eerie, it is antagonistic. And about the time I had mentioned this, we were only like a minute left until we shifted into the outro, which to me feels like the intentions of this place. It's eerie, it's moody, it's antagonistic. There's violence in the atmosphere and it hasn't quite happened yet, but you can taste it on your tongue. There's sounds of things inhuman around you. It's almost as if the song revealed itself at just the same time that I discovered the truth of it. It was actually really eerie how close the two landed on each other, how close the two events happened. And that's what the song ends up feeling to me. And at the end, I was like, that's a weird connection to make. I think I said something like that. And that's because this idea of a maze that moves around you where you can have all the right answers and still end up going nowhere reminds me of a film. An older film, 90s I think, called Cube 2, Hypercube, about a bunch of people stuck in a 3D grid of rooms, and they comprise a cube. 10 rooms by 10 rooms by, 10 rooms this way or something like that. And they were figuring out the right path because some of the rooms are booby trapped. And they feel like they've figured out, how to take the right paths, which rooms are going to lead them towards the exit, which ones aren't. And something happened eventually. I don't remember, but they realized that they had looped in and they had returned to a room that they didn't think they could have returned to, not by their pathing. You know, they've gone straight for a little bit. How'd we wind up at some place that was behind us? And it's because the rooms themselves are being pulled out, rotated, and placed in new directions. The cube itself is rearranging itself constantly. And that's exactly what this song made me feel like. And then, of course, I thought about the ending of Cube 1, which I'm not going to spoil, but the outro to this fits really well with the ending to Cube 1. So I don't remember the ending to Cube 2, which is probably why my brain went to a different ending from the franchise. Um, but yeah, a maze that reconfigures itself. Even if you have the right answers, you don't escape. And realizing just the futile nature of the attempt. And like it really works well with this idea of the mirror, the reflection of ideas, where you might notice going back to the hedge maze idea, you might notice, a specific, I don't know, planter, right? Or architecture or something. And you're like, I know that. I've been here before, but not like this. And you start to wonder, is this a duplication? How is it that this very specific landmark is in a place where it shouldn't be? And that idea of the the unfamiliar familiar, the concept that the landmarks were helping you guide your way and you were basing so many decisions on them only to find out they were just as untrustworthy as something that didn't stand out at all. The confusion and dread that comes from that is just baked into this music. It is a fascinating ride to be on, which is really interesting because I don't know if you could tell from my face, I wasn't really enjoying the music. And I think that's another aspect we need to talk about itself is not what they were doing compositionally, but just the overall sonic texture, the texture landscape of the track. Vocally, both styles of vocals are kind of leaning towards that black metal style, and it's a ton of compression. I even made a little pun about being overly saturated with compression in the vocals. They're so difficult for me to make out anything. Now, the track title is in Finnish. I think the lyrics are in Finnish as well, if I remember correctly. This isn't the first time I've listened to Oranssi Pazuzu, but even if they were in English, I don't think I'd be able to pick anything up. It's really interesting to contrast that with something that feels like black metal, but isn't. There's a clarity to the production that does not say black metal at all. We don't have any of the tropes either. I don't think there are blast beats in here. We don't have really quick alternating snare and bass. We don't have constant 16th notes or tremolo picking. There is a lot of very intentional use of slower rhythmic elements with a clear production. And that doesn't really feel like black metal to me, but there's still a tone, there's still an atmosphere, and there's still a use of heavy repetition that feel like black metal. It really makes me want to call this ambient black metal if that's a thing, or maybe avant garde black metal, which I guess is a bit more of an umbrella term, but could house this song. Um, and it's really interesting to once again be something that feels right but is probably an illusion. I don't remember if or if this band is traditionally black metal. The vocals definitely have me feeling that way, but it's really interesting for me to find something that doesn't utilize any of the tropes of the genre but still feel like it reflects it. It is a strange variation on it, an interesting reflection through a mirror of a genre, seeing a completely different side of it. Um, which kind of makes me just want to check real quick. Um, okay, so this album is psychedelic rock first, black metal second, with some smaller genres being titled atmospheric black metal, which I said ambient, but I guess atmospheric works, and avant-garde black metal. They're not as strong signifiers, but they're still part of the genre tag cloud. Their first album was black metal. Their second one was avant-garde metal with black metal. Their third one was black metal first with some psychedelic component to it, black metal first on their fourth. So it's interesting. And I think that's what it is. The black metal element is still there. I'm not sure how it's been manipulated, how it's been metamorphosized, how it's mutated into this. It is an awkward reflection of the genre, but it is still nonetheless the genre, no different as about the 10-minute mark when I was like, oh, this is a new section. And then I realized it wasn't. It was a variation, a reflection of that core idea we had been listening to for the entire song up until that point. It's very cool how much of this feels subvertive while still adhering to a general concept of black metal, and how that same description of subverting but still clearly tied to the origin works so well, describing the song as a whole and its relationship to its core idea that's presented at the beginning of the track. I'm going to hit some lyrics and then we'll wrap this up. Alright, this is interesting primarily because there is quite a bit of deviation between Google Translate and DeepL's translation. Which is not abnormal that they're different. Google tends to be a bit more figurative, leaning more into the language that it's being translated into, whereas DeepL tends to be a bit more literal, a bit of a drier translation. But I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this, which I wonder if that has to do with the metaphorical writing of the lyrics or something to do with the Finnish language. I don't think I've translated any Finnish before for this. I'm pretty sure when we've checked out Oranssi in the past, it was before I started analyzing lyrics. So it's really cool because I can see different analyses based on these. It's not like a little bit of extra clarity I might get. It's almost a different meaning out of it. Like some of these lines have not necessarily dual meanings, but dual perspectives, dual angles on them, which is very cool. It's also extremely psychedelic. It's short, which is not what I was expecting. We have two decent stanzas and then a very quick outro. So I'm just going to read this because it's wonderful to just hear just how these words dance with each other. Flies flicker out of the darkness, acid colors in the void. I see ghosts in the stream, jellyfish on their faces, face down. I see an escape hatch in the catharsis of time rain. Consciousness bursts or is torn into to saturation A part of me can't keep up. In the fog, shapes condense. They indicate to me to step through the gate. Time ripples, voices radiate. I can't move. Now, to me, there's a lot of confusion in here. There's a lot of things that are not as they seem. There's a lot of elements of taking something that makes sense in reality and inverting it into a form that doesn't. Even taking supernatural concepts, ghosts in the stream, and subverting that, right? You look down at water, you see ghosts in them. I think most of us have some sort of concept based off of our culture and especially pop culture of what that might look like, but we can all sort of envision what ghosts in a stream is like. And then they go further to describe them as having jellyfish on their faces, though they are face down. And this is the subversion. This is the odd reflection where we have our base idea and they show us something drastically divorced from it. Not only that, but it is seemingly impossible. How can you tell what is on their face if they're not facing you? And so there's this very creepy element to it. It's very to me bordering on to that psychological horror realm where it's not so much about gore or jump scares or loud noises or anything like that. It's about the seemingly impossible being brought real and your mind being torn asunder trying to realize what you're looking at. It's that cosmic horror. What is the catharsis of time rain? What is time rain? It brings so many interesting thoughts to my mind. A cloud that could target a specific object and the rain that it drops, pushing it one way or another through time at a random speed? Does it force direction of time in both ways onto the object of which it rains? I mean, it's a catharsis. It could mean anything. Maybe being able to see both horizons before you and after you simultaneously could be cathartic. Cathartic? Is that a word? It could attribute catharsis. What does it mean for consciousness to burst into saturation? Unless we kind of go back to that idea of the mind being torn asunder. So much knowledge that shouldn't be presented to a mortal mind. Shapes that he can't figure out what they are do present some sort of motion to step through the gate. They're not human, it's just shapes, but he still understands that they want him to approach them. And as he does, time ripples or flickers, depending on the translation, both of which are interesting. Time rippling makes a little bit more sense to me because all, the age old sci-fi trope of time is a river kind of idea. But time flickering? What does that look like? Voices radiate, and I can't move. I likened the track to being stuck in a maze that was building itself around you. I don't necessarily see any of that directly in the lyrics, but I do see the element of being trapped in something you cannot understand. Feeling the tension and horror and dread of all that, but also something I didn't touch on because I don't feel the music really showcased it, though the lyrics do, is a type of appreciation for this absurdity. And it's only absurd because your mind can't wrap itself around it. There is no way for someone of our lowly rank in the ranking of deities or dimensional elements. We're just a third dimension creature. What if a fourth dimensional person walks up to us? How would our mind comprehend that? And just being in awe of this thing that we can't ever understand, regardless of the horrors that it brings to the mind. Those are my thoughts on Oranssi Pazuzu's Saturaatio. What did you think? Did you enjoy it? Anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Put those thoughts down in the comments. Above that, if you could, head into the description box. In there, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find a link to my music, a link to the Discord server, ways to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all three. We have a special selection today. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of album openers and explore some more special selections. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.